All systems go. Clear for liftoff.
Yo, what is going on, golf fans? It's your boy, GS Luke, out here for our Round 4 Showdown stream for the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. Going to go over any questions you've got down there in chat, go through the weather report, some of the strategy heading into the final round, some shots gained metrics, a few player poll notes, also some lineup construction towards the end. You know, all the usual details to get you ready for this Sunday. But hopefully today was able to treat you guys nicely. Showdown-wise, it was pretty average, all things considered, a little bit under break even, which has come to be expected when you're out there in a 150 max. But over on the prop side, was able to make it a much better day. So overall, feeling pretty good about what we did over here for moving day, but ready to try and crush our exposure for Sunday. As we got Michael down there, appreciate the kind words about yesterday's picks. And of course, always willing to go over that for you. Let me know if you have any questions. And nice to see you in the live chat for once. What's going on, Philly? What's going on, Kevin, as well? I saw that you have a little bit of a sweat going on this week, so best of luck out there with that. What's going on, Sites? Hopefully you have a better day tomorrow. What's going on, Philly? Not a bad day and not a good day. I would say that's pretty much right where I am as well. It wasn't a horrible day in terms of the ROI, but it could have been better. So let's go out there and try and do so tomorrow. Hit that like button, as Zach says. Go out there. I don't like to beg people to hit the like button, but hey, when the chat's doing it for me, it does my job, makes it a little bit easier. Seamus Power, but Rydick, Taylor, and some others. Exactly. Yeah, we had some, like Shane Lowry was my second highest exposed play today. Scotty Scheffler shot -3. He was my top exposed play. So a lot of things that went right, but let's not talk about Grazerman, who I played at +5. Who else shot way over par? I guess I'd have to look at the leaderboard to kind of remind myself. But yeah, Grazerman's the main one that got me. Who else? I played a little bit of Jordan. I played like 7% Jordan Spieth. So that's not a surprise that he shot 7 over par. But yeah, a lot of good performances as well. Like Shane Lowry went off for us. Tommy Fleetwood, Tom Kim mentioned that he was a good wind player. Minwoo Lee, Seamus Power, Eric Van Rooyen. There were a lot of guys ended up going the right way. So hopefully we can run it back over here for tomorrow. Let's go ahead and hop on in with first off looking at these course conditions, which played much more difficult out there for moving day. Most of that was due to the weather, but over there on Sunday, it looks pretty gusty as well. Now, when we take a look at this forecast, it's not going to be as impactful as what we had for the second half of today, but at least if this forecast comes to fruition, it looks a lot more consistent throughout the entire round. So rather than having the morning guys that got really scoreable conditions, if you woke up this morning, by the way, and checked the weather forecast, it would have been obvious that those morning guys were going to get better side of conditions. And over there on my Patreon page, I made sure to share that info with my people over there. So if you're playing DFS and you're not waking up in the morning and looking at the most up-to-date weather, for example, if you're watching this on replay tomorrow morning, right, and using this forecast as the gospel, right, just take a second look, right? Go over there, even if it's Windfinder, which I think slappies go out there and use Windfinder. Heck, even if it's weather.com or Willy Weather, that's better than having no idea of what you're going to have for tomorrow. So as of right now, it looks pretty consistent across the board. But just like you had for today, if you have one side of the draw that plays in better conditions for an hour or two, it could lead to a 0.5 shot difference, like what you had for round number 3. So that was something that I was keen to. I wish I would have adjusted even more my exposure early. Guys like Shane Lowry, I was, glad to have going off late. A few of the other guys like Tom Kim, some of these other, later starters that had good rounds. But the easier scoring, especially for like your mid to lower tier players, came from the first half of tee time. So just something to point out, because even if it is only like an hour and a half, 2 hours like today, where you have those calmer conditions, it can lead to a pretty sizable advantage. So nothing that we really see in the forecast right now. And just to make sure that we're complete out here with this look, most of them look the same way. Now, Icon Media Blue, which by the way, looked calm across the board for today's round, also showed the same thing for Sunday, which I would say is probably a mistake. because the vast majority of them, the other 4 models, are calling for a lot more significant wind. NEM, very consistent. HRRR, the same thing. And then these top 2 models, it's really hard to parse the data and find a tee time set that looks better. So I think really the prudent thing to do is to wake up tomorrow, take a look at those forecasts. And if you're not going to be able to wake up before lock, then maybe it's a slate where you shouldn't play as heavily, right? If you're not going to have that luxury in the morning, luckily because it's a West Coast lock, most of us should be able to go out there and adjust in the morning, but just make it a part of your process, right? If it's not already something that you're doing with your DFS lineups, it should be, especially if you want to take it even remotely seriously out there with your process. Let's catch up on chat. Then we're going to go through some tee times, which they didn't have them posted as I was going live here, but it does look like we just got those posted on the PGA Tour site. It looks like 3 sums off of both tees, so not a surprise there with your first tee time about 20 minutes earlier than what it was for today. So I don't think that's going to make a massive difference or anything like that, but slightly earlier when it comes to play locking, which means you got to have your lineups done out there by 10:52, and it's going to be the same tee time setup. The first 3 groups off are going to be the guys in the middle of the leaderboard, and then it's going to spread out from there. Your last tee times are going to be either the people in contention or players that are towards the bottom end of the leaderboard. So just to show you that, right, that's where you have your super group of Straka, Rory, Shane Lowry, but also guys like Jordan Spieth and Brendan Todd that are teeing off towards the end. So there's not a massive weather edge as of right now, but if we wake up tomorrow morning and it looks like it's going to be calm for those first few hours, maybe you target some of the first few groups out. So that would really be the only kind of edge that I could see happening. Almost all of them have the winds really kicking up in the afternoon. So maybe the morning guys get the better side of it. Again, we'll have to check a little bit later on, but that's the only sort of weather edge that I could see happening. Let's catch up on chat, see what's going on. Of course, what's going on to Peach? Can Mav make it through a round without falling apart? Who knows? A lot of times it feels like it's like that, but today was a special circumstance, right? It had winds kicking up from 0 to like 30 miles an hour. So I don't know if he can really hold it against them having that sort of day. It was fun, but nevertheless, it was a fun day. Yeah, of course, right? Even if you didn't make a whole bunch of money, it was good sweat. So, and hey, I made a whole bunch of money for props, so I'm not complaining. I'm more than made up for it. Let's put it that way. Vegas birdie free gotcha. Jesus, he went birdie free today. That's even more rare than the bogey free round in conditions like this. Birdie average was still about 4 per round, so tough scenes for Johnny Vegas. Lowry was your top down, just didn't get home. Single entry was decent. There you go. No gloves was better than 2 gloves. That's true. Freaking Lucas Glover went out there, had himself a day. Aaron Rye, though, 5 birdies. I think he shot even par. Didn't have a terrible day, that's for sure. He was well over the average score for Showdown. Must have a killer night out and a massive hangover to not make it up for lock. That's what I'm saying. Like maybe you're a West Coaster, right? And you have a night out, that sort of thing. I kind of get it. But if you're on the East Coast and you can't make the 11 o'clock lock, there's something drastically wrong. Or you had a really good night out to where you couldn't wake up in the morning, which I can't empathize with. I've never been there before, but I've heard horror stories, I guess. Philly says, for single entry, how many chasers and pivots do I want? So yeah, we'll talk strategy now. I think it's a good time for it before we go through these shots gained metrics. So the weather's not really going to, shape our process all that much, but this leaderboard is going to. It's Sunday Showdown. We have the placement points in play, which means this top end of the board up here is going to have to be under strict consideration. The reason I say that is the scoring got a lot harder in round number 3. And because conditions look pretty tough out there for Sunday, placement points are going to matter. Now you're still going to have these -4 to -5 rounds. I mentioned that a -6, -7 could be out there if you really have your best stuff. It's going to be the same story tomorrow. If you go out there, you have your ball striking down, there are super low rounds because of how short the golf course is. You have 4 reachable par 5s. You've got a potentially drivable par 4, depending on the wind direction, which is why you still have players that went so low despite those conditions. So you're still going to have probably at least 3 guys that are shooting -4, -5 or better, but you're also going to have the winner. Because of how tight this leaderboard is, no one's going to win tomorrow by shooting like -2. Like these guys that are like -14, they're not going to win by shooting -16. I can guarantee you, and this is not like the kind of guarantee where it's like tongue in cheek, like, oh, I guarantee you this is going to happen. Like I guarantee you that of these guys up top, at least one of them has a good round, right? It could be a Rory, it could be a Sepp Straka who's starting up there in first place, but between those two, Shane Lowry, Tom Kim. I mean, hell, even the Justin Roses, Cameron Davises of the world, you'd have to think that one of them is going to shoot something like -4, -5. So I think if you're looking for your lineup construction, you want the one winner up top, probably 2, maybe 3 other guys that are finishing in the top 5 when it's all said and done, but 1 to 2 chasers out there as well. And if not 2 to 3 chasers, if you're out there in the large field GPPs, if it's a single entry, maybe you make it the 1 or 2 guys coming from super far back. But I think the placement points are going to matter with the kind of conditions that we have. They're not the end all be all, but of these guys that are starting towards the top, I want one of the guys at T4 or better, right? Like one of these guys is most likely going to win. If it's not one of these players, a Glover, Henley, Eckroat would really be the only other players that I really think have a fighting chance to go out there and win. Like these players like Scotty Scheffler, Pendrith, Højgaard down here, they'd have to do something really special to go out there and actually win this golf tournament. So I definitely want one of these guys. I mean, I'll even say Eckroat or better, I guess. They're at 9th place or better. But down here in this like 10th to 15th range, you could also use these players as like your second or third other guy up top that you're looking for placement points from. So like a Scotty could fit that kind of mold. If you want to take Sunday Colin Morikawa, I guess you could use him. But like guys like Rasmus Stevens, Hodges, these guys at like -8, -9, they have one of those -3, -4 rounds. They're going to finish top 5, at least top 10, most likely end up cracking the top 5 or getting close to it. That's what we want in terms of placement points. We need the winner, 1 or 2 of those guys, and then some places to get leverage. And your leverage could be these guys at like -6, -7, who probably aren't going to finish top 5, top 10, but you're more so looking for that -4, -5 round from. Just going out there, getting that raw scoring. So to get back to your question, after talking through all of that, in single entry, how many chasers and pivots are you looking for? Probably 2, I'd say. So like 2 or 3 is really the hot zone for that. If you're using a bunch of chalk, like maybe you do need 3 to offset 3 pieces of chalk. But if you only have like 2 really chalky guys starting in the top 5, probably only need 2 guys to offset that. So kind of depends on who you take, but hopefully it gives you an idea there. Let's talk through some of the shots gained metrics. So in round number 3, I want to look at the top end of the board and see who was doing it sustainably. And our boy Sepp Straka went out there, really looks rough towards his first half of his back 9. That was really when the winds were first kicking up. But I mean, his last 5-6 holes were just ridiculous. He birdied 4 of his last 5 to go out there and take the lead. And it was all the ball striking. It wasn't like he was making those 30, 40 footers. So that kind of momentum heading into Sunday, I'll admit, is extremely impressive. But we've also got to remember that he showed the nerves out there on a Saturday. And Sunday Showdown is a little bit different than what you do out there for rounds 2 and 3. You've got to think about the mental side with some of these players up top. Like a Rory McIlroy, I know he had a really good round, but it was all the short game. He gained over 2 strokes around the green, over 1.5 strokes out there with the putter. You've got to ask yourself, do you want to trust a Rory who didn't really hit the ball that well over there in round number 3, especially with the mental concerns that we have with Rory in contention. So I think it's the kind of slate where you could use those kind of narrative-based things to help you out with your player pool. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you have to play guys like Tom Kim, Shane Lowry. If you want to take a gamble on them going out there and rebounding with the ball striking, like it's your own process. Go out there and do so. But I personally, I guess I'll just say it, right? Like I'm going to be fading Rory McIlroy over there in my lineups. I'm going to be fading Sepp Straka as well because of that mental factor. And Shane Lowry, I don't even think he's the greatest play. He's not really a cold-blooded killer when he gets into contention. And Tom Kim as well. I guess I'll say it about all these guys up here. Like, I'm sure I'm going to have to play a few of them over there in my player pool. But Tom Kim, he's had choking problems. Cam Davis, he's never really that good on Sundays. Like, Justin Rose, of all these guys towards the top, is the one with the best closing record. And that's kind of sad to say because Justin Rose is far from, a clutch player or anything like that. If you move down even a little bit further, Russell Henley has the Sunday scaries. Lucas Glover, outside of last year where you had those couple wins, he usually has those Sunday scaries. I don't know, this top end of the leaderboard, the more and more I'm looking at it, I don't know if anyone really has that dog factor. So all of the chalk, by the way, is going to be on these guys towards the top. I may have just convinced myself to take a stand against the top end of the board. Now, like I said, I'm still going to have 1, 2 of these guys out there in my lineups and in my player pool, but it really makes me like guys like Scotty Scheffler. Scotty did it off the tee. He did it with his approach play, and I'm getting that weird feeling, and this has happened multiple times last year where I made like some of the most all-time calls on players like Scotty Scheffler. I'm getting Players Championships vibes from last year. When you have a Scotty Scheffler lurking behind a leaderboard of players that are kind of sketchy, I usually like biting on guys like Scotty. So I've got to say, he's going to be one of my big stands towards the top end of the board. He's going to have ownership too, right? It's not just because he's T10 does not mean he's going to be super low owned. Like, he's still going to be in that same ownership range as some of these other players. But don't forget that scoring aspect is still going to matter. And if Scotty has a decent scoring day, shooting -3, -4, like we need out there in our lineups, I mean, that's going to be a top 5 right there. So these guys at T10, I don't want to say you can look at them the same way as these other players towards the top, but almost, right? Because if they shoot that -4, -5 round, you see that about Pendrith, Hoegaard, even these guys at -9, like a Day, Burns, Finau, and there are a lot of decent players down here, right? Like, it's not pure slapdicks that we have down here at T10, T15. It's like more Cabas of the world, right? Like, there are a few slappies, like a Horschel, a Knapp that you have up there towards the top. But if you're looking to get off of some of these more popular players, and honestly, this is what I'm doing in my showdown lineups. I've convinced myself going through this, I'm going to fade the studs at the top, which I know sounds crazy and for a Sunday showdown slate, but we have studs behind them, right? It's not like they're studs at the top and then I'm taking slapdicks starting a little bit further behind. It's Scotty Scheffler. It's Morikawa, guys like a Burns, Day, Finau that we were pointing out before, that you could easily see going out there and shooting something like -4, -5, and they might not win the golf tournament, right? That's okay. Like, you're going to have to live with that with those sort of players. Their ceiling is that top 3 to top 5 finish. But if you play one or two of those guys, they go off, they give you that kind of round, and then you get the one guy up top right, the one that goes out there, shoots like -4 and wins the thing, then you're looking at a really good GPP lineup right there. You've got the 3 guys with placement points that you're hoping for, and then you've got 3 chasers a little bit further down the board in your lineup that you're using for your leverage and your differentiation. So I think that's what I'm going to do over there in my lineups. Of course, guys, I'm far from perfect in my process, more so just trying to give you guys some perspective on the things to think about when you're going out there and crafting your own. But this top end of the board, just to give you guys a rough idea with the ownership, like Rory McIlroy is going to be well over 30%. A Shane Lowry, if he's not over 30%, is going to be damn close to it in some of those large field GPPs. You can say Tom Kim's going to be 25% plus. And then even like your lower tier guys like a Cam Davis, a Justin Rose, you're looking at close to 20, if not over 20% ownership out there in a lot of those contests. Down a little bit further, sure, Scotty's still going to be getting some ownership, but players like Erasmus, probably closer to 10 to 15%. And then even some of your studs down here, like a Colin Morikawa, Sam Burns, Day, Finau, they're going to be half the ownership of those other players in that top 5. So, if you're splurging on one of them with the ownership, that's more than okay. Like I said, you're going to need the winner out there in the large field GPP. But these players are where you can really do some damage and move up the leaderboard, because you're not going to be holding hands with 30% of the field if they go out there and shoot something like -5, -6. So, I know we haven't even really looked through the shots gained metrics quite yet, but from the game theory perspective, I think there's an opportunity to play the ownership game quite a bit here, especially with the tougher conditions. Like, it's not a guarantee that these guys are just going to hold their position towards the top. If they have a sketchy ball striking day and the winds kick up like they're supposed to, that's a +3, a +3, a +4 round real quick right there. And those sort of players, I mean, they could be falling back to -10, -11 and having a vast majority of these players pass them up and end up with those top 10 placement points. So just something to think about with your strategy. I think it's one where the chalk seems a little fragile, if I'm being honest. He is sick too. That's a good call. I didn't think about that. But yeah, Tom Kim can't tap it in. And he can't make any putts for his life. I saw that out there today. Surprisingly, he was just about a neutral with the putter when it was all said and done. But if he had made those couple 3-footers that he missed, I mean, he would have gained probably 2 strokes putting there. So another good observation. He's dealing with the yips right now. And yeah, what's going on, Philly? All right, let's talk through this a little bit. So over here in the shots gained approach tab, if you're trying to find some chasers, this could be a really good way to find guys that were hitting the ball well and that can go out there and putt and improve. And who better than Wyndham Clark? Wyndham Clark, last year, of course, went and broke the course record around Pebble Beach. But if you remember, he did it after a really rainy day. It was lift clean in place out there for round 3, and it's not going to be that tomorrow. They're not going to institute lift clean in place. It's also going to be a lot windier when he shot that 60, but he gained nearly 4 strokes on approach, which is extremely impressive as he's not really the best ball striker. And that was in the same kind of conditions that we're going to have for today. And on top of that, he didn't do anything with the putter, which is very surprising given that he broke the record for feet of putts made by like 50 feet out there in that 60 that he shot last year. So this is the sort of player that I'd be looking to for some leverage, because at T69, I mean, no one's going to use him. You're talking about sub 10% ownership for sure on somebody like a Wyndham Clark, maybe even sub 5%. So I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to get to him out there in lineups, but in large field GPPs, these are the kind of plays that I'm looking for. Erasmus, he's up there towards the top. I kind of like the shots gained profile in general for a little bit of a bounce back heading into Sunday. Lost a little bit over 2 strokes putting, but did go out there and gain nearly 2.5 on approach. That's a relatively favorable stat profile. Taylor Pendrith continues to not be able to make any putts, but also continues to go out there and stripe his irons. That's kind of been the case the entire week for Pendy. So, if he can catch fire with that putter, same thing with a Wyndham Clark, they go from a decent round to a great round. Today, it was -1 over there for Wyndham. I mean, if he gains his 2-3 strokes putting like he's perfectly capable of doing, that gets you to that -3, -4 round right there. Erasmus, even if he only gains like 1 or 2 strokes to the field, that gets him to something like that -4, -5 round. And to bring it back to our strategy and what we're really looking for in our players for tomorrow, it's either guys finishing in the top 5 that are shooting -3, -4, or players that are shooting -4, -5. And you can see an avenue to that, right? Go out there, ball strike it like he was able to today, improve on the putting, and that's how you get to that sort of score. A few other players that have impressive stat profiles. Nick Taylor was one of them as well. Decent day today, ended up shooting even par, but killed himself over there at hole number 12, right? Made a double there, ended up following it up with a bogey at hole number 13. But stat-wise, gained 2 strokes on approach, gave it all away with the short game, which is kind of surprising for Nick Taylor, one of the better POA putters that we have in this field. Not always the best short game player, but he's not used to losing 2 strokes in that category. So just like a few of the other guys like Rasmus that we could see some putting regression with around the green, that you could say a lot of the same things. If you lose a bunch of strokes around the green, a lot of times that just comes down to luck. Also, Sepp Straka, we already mentioned that he had a pretty good stat profile. Scotty Scheffler as well. Mark Hubbard, not really a name that I was thinking about too much, but he's T69. He's going to be sub 5% owned. So if you're looking for one of those super low owned plays to differentiate yourself, like a Wyndham Clark, Mark Hubbard would fit that same sort of description. Jake Knapp is up there in T15. So he's one of those players that has that placement potential, gained in both of those ball striking categories. Matt Fitzpatrick had a good iron day, but couldn't make any putts at T52. He's a potential leverage spot. Denny McCarthy, oh boy. He went out there. He gained in both ball striking categories again. He didn't lose strokes putting this time. Rounds 1 and 2, he lost to the field, which is just unheard of for Denny McCarthy. But look at this, continues to hit the ball beautifully, and it's just a sleeping giant waiting on that putter. So, this is another one of those stat profiles where, I know Denny, I know he didn't lose strokes on the greens, but he's used to gaining in bunches out there to your usual PGA Tour field. Wouldn't surprise me at all if he improved on that performance, and if he continues to hit the ball like he did today. It's another super low round right there. You got JT. JT had a horrible... Really glad I didn't play him in Showdown today. Let's put it that way. But he lost 2.5 strokes putting there. They gained a little bit there on approach. At T37, if you're looking for a low-owned play towards the top end of the board, Justin Thomas would be that player. He's going to be sub 10% owned, maybe 10 to 12%, you'd think, over there in those large field GPPs. And he's not going to finish top 5 starting from T37. But if he shoots you a -5, -6 rounds, that would be his avenue out there to the optimal lineup. And considering that he does have some potential putting regression coming, at least on my radar. Not sure if I'm going to play him, but he's at least on my radar. Doug Gim, for the 3rd straight day, lost strokes over there on approach. Day 1, he lost like 5 strokes. Day 2, he lost 2 strokes. Day 3, only lost 1.2. So just as I kind of joked around with yesterday, he is trending in the right direction. But, I mean, come on, like when's it going to turn around, dude? Like you can't lose this many strokes putting just literally every single round out there on tour and gain strokes on approach every time. I mean, it's so unbearable to watch. It's just painful when this guy's setting up so many birdie looks and just can't get any of them to go down. Hideki Matsuyama hit the ball a lot better than what you had for round number 2. Round 2, he lost with off the tee on approach. It's good to see that he got back to gaining out there with the irons. So kind of like a JT starting at T37, you're looking at 10 to maybe 12% ownership, I'd imagine. And another decent stat profile. Hit the ball well, then lost with the putter. If he goes out there, he flips that flat stick, could be a potential leverage spot. Let's go through a few others. So Matthew Pavon, another gainer on approach that lost with the putter. And we'll, I guess, kick it off here with Kevin Yu as well. Kevin Yu, he gained just under a stroke out there with the irons. So not quite as elite as some of the other players that we went through, but a good stat profile. Pretty balanced across the board with him into the negative over there with the putter. Unfortunately for Kevin Yu's sake, though, he is one of the more inconsistent putters that we have on all the PGA Tour. So I'm not 100% sure that he's going to turn it around. Other thing I like to look at for all these is, of course, guys that popped with the putter. These sort of players likely got a little bit lucky. So a Max Homa gaining 3.5 strokes putting, probably not happening again. Same thing with guys like a Sibu, an Echeverria, a Thigala up here towards the top. I mean, I played Homa today. I played guys like Thigala. I'm glad that I was able to take advantage of a hot putter, but I wouldn't be counting on that happening again, especially because so many of these guys were sketchy with their ball striking. Max Homa was able to gain in both of those two categories, but the vast majority of these guys that gained a bunch of strokes on the greens weren't your best players when it came to their tee to green. So, obviously Tommy Fleetwood was the exception to that rule. That's why he went out there and went super low in terms of his score. But most of this top end of the board is going to be in consideration for a fade. And Tommy Fleetwood, it would be really tempting to go out there and tail him after having that sort of round. But what I will say is that he's a little bit inconsistent. He also has those Sunday scaries. So I'm a little hesitant to go out there and play him, as I think that you're going to see enough people tailing that kind of form that he's in that 15 to 20% range. So I'd personally rather take a shot on somebody that's T15 and maybe a little bit lower owned. And I know it sounds crazy, but when you compare the ownership of Fleetwood tomorrow to maybe somebody like a J-Day or Sam Burns, I have a sneaking suspicion that Fleetwood, because of that form, might be higher owned than some of those guys at T15. So I guess that's the reason why I would say that. Guys that lost a lot of strokes putting that potentially could see a little bit of a rebound. Jordan Spieth, I wouldn't count on it as he's brand new from injury. So not a surprise at all that he's having a really tough week. But at Benny Ann, we mentioned that he was putting way over his head in round number 2. And look at that, right? He came back down to earth and lost 2.5 strokes. Maybe he rebounds in round number 4, right? It could go back the other direction now that he had his down round. The guys like a JT, Ben Griffin, Hughes, Fowler, etc., all these guys that are dark red in the putting category, if they're even a neutral over there tomorrow, that's 2 to 3 strokes that they're gaining to the field. And in some cases, like Ricky Fowler, he hit the ball pretty well, gained in both ball striking categories. Not a whole lot of them actually played that solid of golf, but Pavon, I know we talked about him before. These are the kind of players I'd be looking at. Now, if they lost like 2 strokes off the tee like Razorman and on approach, I don't know if I really like them. I don't know if I like Hughes losing 3 strokes on approach. Like, that's a little bit of a red flag. And I guess the same thing with Benny Ann, right? Him losing a stroke on approach. And, those kind of guys, maybe you don't play out there with that putting regression. But if they looked decent enough with some of the other stats, then maybe they are in consideration out there as pivots. And in most cases, a lot of these guys that didn't have the best putting days aren't going to be chalky. So, for example, a Ricky Fowler at T29, he's not going to be all that popular. Victor Hovland, if you wanted to go that direction, not the best stat profile, but also not the worst when it came to his ball striking, about neutral between those two categories. He's not going to be chalky. He'll probably be like 15% owned at the very most, probably closer to 12 to 10%. These kind of players, you could also look for a little bit of regression from. So obviously the shots gained metrics, they have their bounds. They're not always going to give you the absolute nuts for the next day. But what it does show us are guys that maybe got a little bit lucky the day before. And, a lot of times it's hard to be lucky 2 days in a row. So it's kind of the idea out there with those. Over here on the SHIPIT Nation stone, we're going to have the round 4 historical. So this is the round 3 stone, so don't use this over there for tomorrow. But over there on the SHIPIT Nation site, using round 4 historical is going to be especially valuable. Round 3 was already something we incorporated into our process, but for round 4, it's even more so correlated because you have the pressure of being close to a lead. Now, not all round 4s are the same, right? Sometimes you're in contention, sometimes you're not. But in general, a lot of the guys that have that good round 4 historical are players that are a little bit more clutch than others. Now, I would say I trusted a little bit more on players with more of a sample size, but luckily for us, this is a top tier field. There's not really anyone with the exception of Rasmus Højgaard, who we haven't seen a whole bunch out here on the PGA Tour. So we have a really good idea for how those kind of players play. So over here on the right, you want to look for guys that are an A minus, or an A plus. Those are going to be some of your most clutch players in the field. You can look at your true approach delta again. That's another way to kind of go through these approach stats that we were just talking about. A very positive true approach delta is what we're looking for out there in players. And then you can look at some of the putting stuff on top of that as well. And just to go through this to see who some of the top plays were. I mean, look at this from the round 3 stone. Shane Lowry marked down as a high leverage play. Sahith Theegala down as a high leverage play. And then down towards the bottom, let's see, look, Brian Harman was down there as a sleeper, and I believe he had a bogey-free round when it was all said and done. Just another example of using the stone to your advantage. So make sure to check it out over there on the SHIPIT site if you guys haven't already. On top of your regular shots gained metrics, right? I think having a well-rounded process is really the key out here to Showdown. Right? It wasn't like we just brought up the ball striking list and we're like, I'm playing the top of the ball striking list, right? It's never really that straightforward when it comes to your process. I think if you can look at, a multitude of different things, 4 or 5 different factors in your lineups, you're going to have a much more balanced player pool, and you're going to have much better results long term. So, incorporating things in like that round 3 historical, DGen scorecard would be a good way to try and find some win players. All those different tools that you have over there on the SHIPIT Nation site, perfect for a slate like this. So shots gained metrics can be part of that process. Ownership, all of that, I'm going to add on top of that as well. Let's talk through some lineup construction. We'll see if there's any questions to go through down in chat. If you have any players you want to deep dive on, just let me know. I'll get back to those. And let's go through some lineup construction together. Yeah, what a day for day. That's for damn sure. Do you have any past experience on how Nat plays in poor weather? No, because he's a little bit new, right? He was a PGA Tour rookie last year. I would say with his high ball flight, I'm a little bit sketched out by it, but he does hit a low driver. He's got that low cut driver with his mini driver that he hits. When he wants to hit it low, he hits the mini driver off of the ground. And I mean, it's been widely publicized. You've probably seen it before. He takes a divot like 2 inches behind the ball. So he does have a way to hit the ball off the tee in these kind of conditions, but into the green with that super high ball flight can be problematic at times. Yeah, damn it, Denny. I'm right there with you. And I'm going right back to it. That's for sure. No pain, no gain. Exactly. If we hop off Philly, so we got to understand about it. He nukes. He shoots -9, right? If we play him, maybe he nukes, right? But at the very least, we spare ourselves the mental torture of not playing him when he has that -9 round. So it's a plus EV strategy to play him, I'd say. Thoughts on Nick Taylor and Rasmus? So I went over Nick Taylor a little bit earlier. Really good off the tee and approach stats and lost with the putter. I think that sets up well for round number 4. And then Rasmus, he lost like 2.5 strokes putting. So both of those players are guys that I could see turning it around with the putter. And even if it's only like a neutral day in both cases, it's a respectable round to like -3 if they continue to hit the ball like they have the last few days. So I'm a pretty big believer in both. I haven't built my player pool yet, so I'm not sure if I'm using either one, but definitely guys I'm considering. Seamus Power has been your secret everyday thoughts for round 4. Yeah, the good course history is why I played him today, and he's a good wind player. He's won at multiple events that are coastal, and a lot of his first round leaders are on some of the hardest courses and hardest conditions. One that really comes to mind is like the Bermuda Championship. He shot like -9 one time when the scoring average was over par. I remember it being like a 10 shots gained round, one of the bigger shots gained in one single round that we've ever seen out there in the PGA Tour. From round 4, he's going to get a little bit more popular because he started to move up that board, but he's not at the portion of the leaderboard where he's going to be mega chalk either. So, if you've been playing him all week, you're probably riding him heading into Sunday, because I would argue that the conditions are beneficial for his sort of game. He's a low spin player. He's a relatively low ball flight player. Doesn't have all that swing speed as some of the younger guys do. which is sometimes what you want on a day like this. That's why guys like Brian Harmon had a lot of success. Minwoo Lee has that low ball flight, like Shane Lowry. Like, they're just countless examples of guys that fit that kind of narrative that played well, to where I think it can make a whole lot of sense. And yeah, that's it. Yeah, dude, you don't want to torture yourselves with fading guys and they go off. That honestly hurts a lot more than playing a guy who sucks. Like, you play a guy who sucks, it's like, okay, like that happens. It's golf. Like, it happens all the time, right? But if you don't play the guy and you had a feeling he was going to go off and he does, it stings a whole lot more. All right, let's talk through this lineup construction. So lineup construction for Sunday Showdown is a little bit unique, where I think you want to start with your chalk first. So rounds 2 and 3, we mentioned starting with some of your pivots and then finding your chalk. Sunday Showdown, because you have to prioritize some of that, I think it's a really good idea to start there. So where I'm usually going to start my lineups is with my winner. And I guess for this one, I'm just going to take Tom Kim. He's somebody I have an outright on, so I guess he's the one I want to win. But, you know, up top, if that's Rory for you, you go ahead and play him, right? Whoever the case is. It could be a Lowry. It could be a Tom Kim, like we're going to do for the sake of this lineup. But pick your winner towards the top end of the board. The next guy you want to pick is somebody that you think is going to send into the top 5. For me, that's Scotty Scheffler. I already told you guys that I think he's just lurking right there at T9 and could be in for a really big day. So let's throw Scotty into that lineup and let's find one more. And for the last one, I'm going to go down here to the -9s and maybe even -8s down here to one of these guys that's a little bit lower owned. Let's throw, I guess Seamus, right? We just had a comment about it. Let's throw Seamus in there at T20. So Seamus probably going to have to shoot -4, -5 to get us that top 10, top 5 that we're hoping for. But we've got one top 5, top 10. We've got one top 5, hopefully, if Scheffler can have himself a day. And then, you know, Tom Kim, who we're counting on going out there and winning this golf tournament. For our last 3 spots, if you're in a single entry, I think you could afford to take one more guy towards the top end of the board. So if I was playing in like a couple hundred entry, single entry, you know, maybe I consider adding a Shane Lowry here too, just because the placement points are going to matter with the wins that are forecasted. But if I'm in a large field GPP, I'm probably finding those 2 to 3 chasers that we talked about before. So just to show you what that would look like over here in the 8K range, maybe rather than taking a Lowry in that large field GPP, this is where you get a little bit more modest when it comes to that ownership. Maybe it's a Sam Burns, who's closer to like 10 to 12% ownership, as opposed to like a 25 to 30% owned Shane Lowry. Now we're down to like 73.5 for our last 2 spots. We're going to throw in a Wyndham Clark. He's going to be a low-owned pivot, probably sub 5% in most of those contests. And then for your last man in, because we're thinking, you know, through the large field GPP lens right now, you want to avoid some chalk here. So guys like a Sam Stevens and Eckroat, you might be able to get away with it just because you only have those 3 chalky players. But let's say rather than Sam Burns, we had a chalkier player like Lowry in there at $8,300. Our last man in, you probably don't want to take a Rasmus Højgaard here because you already have 4 guys towards the very top, which is quite a few out there in a lineup. And if you take a 5th one, I mean, we only have 1 pivot in that kind of lineup. So you can see where you're starting to get into some trouble. And that's even trouble in like single entries. In your single entry, if you have 5 guys starting towards the top, you're going way, way overboard when it comes to those placement points. So that's why I said like maybe you tone it down a little bit and go to a Sam Burns, who still has placement point potential. I mean, he's T14, but he's about half the ownership as what you have with a Shane Lowry. So it's all about, you know, just balancing that ownership, that game theory as you guys go throughout your lineup. And your last man in, a lot of times, is going to be a sub 5%er to offset some of that chalk towards the top. So in this case here, like a Ben Griffin is the kind of player I'd be eyeing, or like maybe a Benny Ann, right? We mentioned the fact that he lost over 2 strokes putting today. If he goes out there and he has a better round 4, maybe he's a good way to like round off this lineup, leaving $100 on the table, not really getting the placement point potential with either him or Wyndham Clark. But we've got 4 guys that can conceivably top 5, top 10. Hopefully one of them going out there and winning as well. That's how you want to craft your showdown lineups, right? You want to be able to get some of those placement points, but it's not the end all be all. And just to kind of circle back to that, sure, guys like Rory, Shane Lowry, like they were towards the top and they played well, but Tommy Fleetwood came out of nowhere with that -5 round. Guys like a Minwoo, a Seamus Power came out of nowhere with their -4 rounds. You're going to have these kind of guys too to go out there and have yourself a day. And it's not always going to be the guys starting at like T30 or better. It might be a guy at T67 that's going out there and having that kind of round. So just keep that in mind with your lineup construction. like rounds 2 and 3, you want to embrace the chaos a little bit. Even though we need placement points tomorrow, know that there's chaos. Know that there's going to be a lot of people moving up and down that board, and account for it out there with your lineup construction. Let's see. You got a Glover outright on Monday, not great on Poa, but he stripes his irons. That's a nice little sweat to have. So best of luck out there. And you have McIntyre, you want a little deep dive on. So McIntyre, he had a good round. He shot -2 today, but I don't know how he did it with the shots gained metric. So let's check in on what he did. So he gained off the tee, lost on approach. Actually, he had a pretty average day, I guess, all things considered, but he's really good in windy conditions. I played him today because of that. I mean, he's known for that. Won at the Genesis Scottish Open under some of the nastiest conditions we've ever seen. And he started off a lot better than he finished. He started on his back nine, so he was -4 on the harder side of the golf course. When the wind kicked up, he definitely got into some trouble there, but it was a 3-putt at hole number 2. Hole number 3, I think he missed like a 3-footer or something like that for par. And then hole 4, it was the same thing. He missed like a 4-foot putt. So it wasn't really the ball striking that cost him. You can see the green regulation. He hit most of them when the winds were up. I mean, even towards the end of his front 9, he hit those 3 greens. On the back 9, he did miss those 3 in a row there, but he still hit 5 on those super windy conditions. I think he sets up well. I'm all for it. And of course, Michael, best of luck over there tomorrow, guys. That's all I've got out here for the round 4 live stream. Best of luck with all the exposure that you guys are getting to. Smash the like button for the SHIPIT Nation if you guys haven't already. Also subscribe so you don't miss any of the content to come. And for the betting and prop preview on my channel, make sure to check it out over at LukeDFS. On YouTube, I'll be going live at 9 p.m. Eastern time, going through all my favorite bets and props on Underdog and Prize Picks. It's been a pretty good week for that so far, especially today with some of the unders that I took on strokes and birdies. So if you've been wondering about conditions for tomorrow, how I'm handling those betting boards, make sure to tune on into that a little bit later on. Well, that's all I've got, guys. Appreciate you stopping by, supporting the channel, supporting the content as you guys always do. Of course, sign up for the SHIPIT Nation for access to the stone and all their projections. And for my projections, you can find those over there on my site. That's all I've got, guys. Appreciate you stopping by, and let's ship it out there for round number 4.